Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to another Sabbath Insight. I, of course, am Chief Yuya, and I want to welcome all of you who are historical watchers and supporters, and willfully those who implement the information. And for those of you coming for the first time, welcome. I'm gonna jump right into it, and our last session we had I think a good build on just the science of idols and idol worship, and recognizing when we're confronting an idol and when that's in front of us. And in this session, I wanted to really deal with some of the things that we sort of put in our path that block us from understanding, and of course those things that we put in our path intentionally. And I think it's quite fitting. As you can see around, I am surrounded by not only water, but also by its other forms, snow, or the fluff, or snowflakes, of course, right? And I think that element is really fitting, and the transition of that element, from its liquid form to its more solid form. Snow, though, is not necessarily ice. It's interesting because it's a combination of ice and water, so it's really two forms at once. And when you really understand the science of snow, it's really like three forms at once. But nonetheless, I wanted to speak about some of the things that we do often intentionally to block ourselves from receiving the proper transformation that we're supposed to receive from the Creator. When you look at the water element, and it's something that many of us are blessed to have access to, whether we live near it or whether we can get to it pretty easily, or we could just have it running through the pipes in our house. One of the things about water, and in particularly the flow of water, is that the flow of water represents the flow of the Creator into our beings, or into us as vessels. If we look at ourselves as earth, as we should, and in particular broken pieces of earth, shards of pottery, we realize that water in particular, it flows downward, and it represents the flow of the Creator into us as vessels. And that's a natural thing, when you're looking at rivers and streams and creeks and various bodies of water, you'll see that same downward flow from upper to lower. And absolutely, if we look at the process of rain or process of snow, we have something coming from upper to lower, right? That process within itself, or that constant reminder, tells us what the process of receiving the Almighty is. Water itself being, as you read in my book, Grasping the Root of Divine Consciousness, I mentioned that water is a container of consciousness, or it's a container of spirituality. So the rain represents the descending of consciousness onto humanity, or onto the earth, right? That's the symbolism of rain. And we can look at snow in a similar fashion. In fact, most snow or most rain that we experience begins as snow in the upper atmosphere, and then becomes rain before it reaches down to us. And we know that this process is sort of a repeated process of this consciousness falling, and then consciousness ascending, and then consciousness descending. And it's because the rain itself, or the water, doesn't escape the Earth's atmosphere. As the Earth is spinning 1,037 and a third miles an hour, it's spinning at that speed, and it creates a gravitational force, and that gravitational force keeps things down in its atmosphere. So when you look at this beautiful and natural phenomenon of the flow of water, or like I said, this process of taking that which is above and bringing it to a lower vessel, or something lower than it, like I said, it gives you an inclination of what Yah is doing with us, right? We as the vessels, what happens is that if we were to receive a flow of water, let's say a deluge, and a deluge had no level of contraction. Raindrops are a contraction of water, right? It's not like you just got one big blob of water that comes down constantly. If you did, we would just be eroded and wiped away into nothing. So there's a contraction of the water. And sometimes that contraction represents itself as rain, sometimes it represents itself as snow. But it gives us relief in between the consciousness, in between the knowledge. If you could look at snow or look at rain as a downpouring of conscious information, or a downpouring of conscious knowledge or consciousness or spiritual, inclination, spiritual light trapped in water, then the drops themselves allow us the relief, right? We could sort of dodge and dance between the raindrops. But once you start to see that that's a natural process of something falling in that way, you realize, okay, so the purpose is for us to be saturated with that knowledge, for us to be saturated with that consciousness. Now, let's get to the intentional ways that people seek to prevent that process. So some of you may remember when you were younger, some of you, maybe not all of you, some of us had experiences where those who took care of us, they would maybe like on a cold day like today, like right now it's about I think 19 degrees, somewhere around there. But on a cold day like today, you would have a caretaker who would completely coat your face, your head, and maybe other parts of you in some sort of moisturizer, some sort of body butter, or some sort of petroleum. And, this was supposed to keep you warmer somehow, keep the cold off your skin, or because it's so cold, to keep your moisture locked in. And of course, we all dealt with this to varying degrees depending on the level of bulletproof protection you were going to receive, right? And what happened also, you might have found yourself in those situations, let's say prepared in that way, and it rained outside. One of the things that you would notice is that the rain would not saturate and absorb through your porous skin. It would actually just bead at the surface. Well, that experience and that phenomenon, if you want to call it as such, is something that we often do intentionally. We, whether it be the petroleum that we lace ourselves with, or whether it be the oil, or I'm going to use the idea of wax. Well, there's a process here to pay close attention to, and that's, the waxing that we do of ourselves sometimes. Like I said, I'm going to use wax as the example. And wax has the ability to create a moisture barrier. When you want, it can keep out moisture and allow things from getting saturated with water or whatever that you're seeking to block out. Oftentimes we wax ourselves on purpose, and what that means is that when you understand the nature of the universe, you'll understand that in the cosmos, the elements that primarily comprise what the cosmos is are the primary elements that comprise those of us who are carbon forms living a human experience. So you start to understand that we are made of the same substances of the universe. So all things eventually become one thing, or all things are one thing. Well, it's no different when it comes to consciousness. See, when that water is rained down on you, the whole purpose of the water being rained down on you is so that eventually you become the substance of the water. Your humanity, which you use to block the water, or the wax that you may use to block, is your ego, is your arrogance, is your vain sense of identity, is your vanity, right? So you put up a barrier of vanity, you put up a barrier of ego, and when the Creator rains down on you, you block the rain. You say, no, you're not going to saturate me and get through, because if you saturate me, eventually I will be no more. My vanity will be no more. My ego will be no more. My sense of identity will be no more. And I will no longer be this contraction unto myself, but I will be one with you. And that's not what I want. So what we do is we put that barrier between us and the raining element, right? Now, what's so interesting is that when you look at the phenomenon of snow, right? What's so interesting about snow is that snow is comprised of, on the molecular level, individual snowflakes that clump together. Now, when you have water droplets are the same. They, water binds unto itself, right? So these things join together, but they're not as unique as snow. Snow and snowflakes, like sometimes you can view a snowflake and you see, okay, like, no two are the same. Well, it's the same thing with a clump of snow, right? that clump of snow is comprised of multiple snowflakes. Well, those snowflakes and those clumps of snow, they represent something very interesting and very special as it relates to how we receive information from the Almighty. Sometimes people, they look at, like I said, they'll ask questions like, if I do this thing and do this thing, will I get this? Everything is very transactional because sometimes you have people who get into situations not because they have a love for the situation or a love for what it can produce, but they only have a love for self. They're just lovers of self. You find this sometimes in friendships, you find this in marriages, you find this in work situations where you could be deceived because you're thinking that someone has conjoined with you because of their love for you, but they really have conjoined with you because of the advantage that they see for themselves. So they're just joining with you because of love of self, right? And sometimes that comes out, well, it's always there, or sometimes you realize it, later on in the process. So the thing about it is that when you look at the universal nature that people are looking for, when they ask questions like, so if I do this, I get this. If I do that, I get that. And not realizing that the universe, or more importantly, the Creator, delivers messages to us in a very singular, sort of unique way for the person, right? And this is why two people can look at the same thing or hear the same thing and not necessarily see the same thing, or not necessarily come back and take away the same message, because we're all given unique ways to receive, and the only way you can really take full advantage of that is with relationship, right? So when you look at snow and you look at the individuality of snowflakes, what that is it's a great opportunity for the hard-headed, for those who can't take the deluge of rain. The deluge of rain would be like pure truth being delivered to you. Like, here you go. This is what it is. And some like, I can't stand the rain, reference to the song, right? So what they end up having to do is to get snow. Because what is snow? Snow is a slower form of that consciousness. It's a slower form of that rain. So what happens when it snows, if you hold out your tongue during a snowstorm or just during a snowfall and you let snowflakes drop on your tongue, right? What happens? They slowly melt. Well, that slow melting is representative of the slow absorption of knowledge, the slow absorption of spiritual consciousness. You see, so the snow itself, it's individualized, each flake. So it's like, okay, I tried to give you the rain, you couldn't take it. You definitely weren't going to get in the water. So let me give you the snow, right? And it's a very individualized message, and no two snowflakes are the same, right? So this message and this consciousness is strictly for you. And you receive this message that's strictly for you, and you receive it at a much slower rate. At a much slower rate that you should be able to tolerate with no issue. You see, that's the blessing of snow. And of course, we're speaking esoterically and we're speaking metaphysically, but we're also speaking scientifically, right? This is how it works with snow. So when you're looking at the relationship, and then of course you have ice, right? Now ice is very interesting because it's a combination of air, water, and earth. See, now ice is formed through microscopic dust particles, and they tumble through the air, and what eventually happens is that water clings to these microscopic particles, and then they freeze over and they create an ice, right? But ice always has a nucleus. Even if you look at an ice cube, in your freezer, if you look deep into it, you'll see that there is a center. There's a nucleus to it. So that's an even slower way for us to receive information and to receive revelation. And the thing about it, with the uniqueness of snow, right, and the uniqueness of a snowflake, it represents the metaphorical value of information, the metaphorical value of consciousness. A lot of times people will say things like, well, just tell me this, just tell me that. And a true teacher knows that you probably can't handle just being told this or that. Do you just want your head dunked in the water? Well, there's the truth. Go dunk your head in the water. Well, no, I won't be able to breathe. I won't be able to survive. So then take this metaphor and go think about it. Go reflect on it. right? So that's what the snow is. The snow is an individualized metaphor for you. And then once you receive that individualized metaphor, do you get your water right away? No. It has to melt. So you have to carry that snow for a while. You have to carry that snowflake until it melts, right? So there's such a great value in that lesson of the different forms, that water may take on, whether it be, again, it's in its liquid form, solid form, or in its gaseous form, where it's going up into the atmosphere, never going, beyond the atmosphere of the earth because of the gravitational pull, but receiving its change from up top and then coming back down and then starting its process again. And like I said, most of the time it starts as this individualized snow in the upper atmosphere and then comes down as rain. But again, it's the great value of the metaphor that we receive through the snowflake. The snowflake is an individualized message that melts slowly, right? So a lot of times our demandings of the universe or of our spiritual guides, our spiritual leaders of, give me the answers now, which of course is so very arrogant. True spiritual leaders always speak in metaphors and parables because you probably can't handle the truth.